When you think of the Brothers Grimm, happily ever after is the last thing that usually comes to mind. But after hearing these even creepier older versions of Little Red Riding Hood, full of dark details, dirty deeds, and even Red herself eating Grammy Dearest, yep, Grimm's version ends up being a best-case scenario with the happiest ending, if you can believe it. In these older versions, there is rarely a happily ever after, so of course, consider this your warning. First, let's look at the Grimm's collected version, because of course it's still pretty, well, grim. Once upon a time, there was the sweetest little girl, loved by all, but especially by her grandma, who made her a fine red velvet cape that the girl wore everywhere from then on. When Grandma falls ill, Red's mother sends her out to deliver cake and wine, but behave yourself on the way and stay on the path, otherwise you might fall down and break the glass. Which, broken glass is of course the least of our worries, Mom. Along the way to Grandma's house in the woods, Red encounters a wolf and behaves a little too well. She tells the wolf she's going to bring sustenance to her poor, ill, and frail grandmother who lives all alone in a cottage a good quarter hour from here in the woods, under the large oak trees, near some hazel bushes. You must know the place. Lesson 1. Don't tell a stranger where you are going and exactly where your sweet grandma lives all alone, ill, and unprotected. The wolf sees this for the delicious opportunity that it is and suggests that Red check out all the flowers and birds singing in the woods that she's missing by staying on the trodden path. This she does and spends a long time dawdling while the wolf goes to Granny's. "Who's there?" the sick woman asks. The wolf sugars up his voice and pretends to be Red. "Little Redcap, I'm bringing you some cake and wine." This voice apparently checks out for Grandma, who basically says, "Let yourself in." And no sooner does she say that than she is gobbled up by the wolf in her own bed, who then wears her clothes and pulls the curtains shut. Meanwhile, Red, arms too full of flowers, finally gets to her grandmother's house and finds the door already open. She must feel something's off because she, quote, usually feels happy at Grandma's, but why am I so afraid now, she thinks. Lesson 2, trust your gut. She, however, doesn't and goes over to the bed where she pulls aside the curtains and sees her grandma in the bed with the cap pulled over her face. So close to the wolf, she never really stood a chance. But the wolf plays with her for a bit. "Oh, grandmother, what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with." "What big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with." "What big hands you have." "All the better to grab you with." "What a horribly big mouth you have." "All the better to eat you with." And he does, of course, because we know this story. But it doesn't end here. Remember, this is a happy one. The wolf, now satiated, passes out, snoring really loudly. A huntsman just happens to be passing by the old woman's cottage when he hears the snoring, which strikes him as odd because a woman couldn't possibly snore that loudly. What? Anyway, he enters and sees the wolf that he has been actively hunting for such a long time. Wow, what luck. He figures that this wolf has eaten the older lady, so rather than just shoot it, he takes a pair of scissors and cuts open the belly. Only a few strokes in and Red's cap pops out, followed by the rest of her. "Oh, I was so frightened. It was so dark inside the wolf's body." How is she in one piece? Does the wolf have a snake-like dislocatable jaw? And then out pops Grandma too. The fam's all here. Red collects some large heavy stones and fills up the wolf's belly. I'm assuming someone sews the belly shut because when the wolf wakes up and tries to run away, the stones are so heavy that he falls down dead. Everyone's alive excepting the wolf, and the huntsman gets a wolf's pelt out of it too. Red vows never to leave the path again. The end of part 1. Part 2 has Red and Granny offing another wolf Red encounters. They lock the door, finally, so it can't get inside. But it climbs on the roof to wait for Red to leave for the evening so he can eat her in the woods on the way home. Gran sees his play, and as luck would have it, she boiled sausage yesterday. She tells Red to dump that old meat water in the trough outside. Stealthily, I'm assuming. And the wolf can't even help it. It smells so good. He falls off the roof and into the diluted old sausage water and drowns. The end. Again. All's well that ends well, and that's about it in terms of ending well. In Perrault's Mother Goose version, from well before the Grimms, the story not only ends abruptly when Red gets eaten, but leading up to that there are some more disturbing details of a different predatory nature that we're gonna dive into, that the Grimms leave out. They scrubbed out a lot of mentions of mature stuff from their stories. The remainder of these tales all have that creepy, thirsty metaphorical element and then some. An interesting related tidbit, Perrault is considered the first to use the red hood in the story, potentially signaling that the girl has come of age, if you will. After his, it kinda stuck. This Mother Goose story starts off similarly, with Little Red, the most beautiful little country girl ever seen, who is wearing her signature red cap, bringing cake and butter to Granny when she encounters a smooth-talking wolf in the forest, who would eat her right then and there if it weren't for those woodcutters nearby. Red tells him exactly where she's going, and he rushes off to head her off. He pretends to be Red, and Granny tells him to let himself in. This he does, and ravenously falls immediately upon Grandma in her bed and ate her up in a moment, for it had been more than 3 days since he had eaten. When Red gets to the house, her grandmother tells her to come inside. She notices the raspy voice, but assumes her gran must just have a cold. Put the cake and butter on the stool and come into bed with me, says the wolf, dressed in his victim's clothing. And obediently, even though she thinks her gran is sick, Red takes off her garments and joins the wolf in bed, where this close she can see how odd he looks in the night clothes. His big arms, better to hug you with. His huge legs, better to run with. Ears, eyes, and teeth do not escape her notice, but it's too late because the wicked wolf fell upon Little Red Riding Hood and ate her all up. The end. No lucky woodsman's break here. And if there was any doubt what the wolf stands for in this tale, Perrault gives us a pretty blunt moral. Children, especially attractive, well-bred young ladies, should never talk to strangers, for if they should do so, they may well provide dinner for a wolf. I say wolf, but there are various kinds of wolves. There are also those who are charming, quiet, polite, unassuming, complacent, and sweet, who pursue young women at home. And in the streets. And unfortunately, it is these gentle wolves who are the most dangerous ones of all. Now, with that type of wolf in mind, say a smooth-talking pursuer of young women, a lot of things in the Perrault story are a lot more, concerning. Like, say, how he ate the grandmother in her bed because he hadn't, eaten for 3 days, and poor Little Red actually strips down and snuggles with the wolf in Granny's bed. Fun situation to some? But we're not done yet, and these tales get more gruesome. Like this next one, Little Red Hat, where it's not a wolf that antagonizes the young girl, but an ogre. And this one takes a tough stomach. As the story goes, an old woman and her granddaughter, Little Red Hat, were working in the field. Grandma has to leave early and asks Little Red to please bring her some soup later on. This she does, but along the way, an ogre approaches the girl, and she of course gives him too many details. Are you going the way of rocks or the way of thorns? He asks, and when she says, the way of rocks, he books it through the thorny path to get to Grandma's first. And of course devours the poor woman almost entirely, except for some of her intestines, which he ties to the door latch string, her jaws, teeth, and some blood, which he places in the kitchen cupboard. Little Red, meanwhile, has happily collected all the flowers she can, and when she finally strolls up to the house, notices that the string to get inside is soft. Grandmother, this thing is so soft. Just pull and keep quiet. It's your grandmother's intestine. I'm sorry, what? What did you say? Just pull and keep quiet. This should have been Little Red's first big red flag, but the story keeps going on in this way. She goes inside and says to Grandma, I'm hungry. The ogre replies, go to the kitchen cupboard. There's still a little rice there. She goes to the cupboard and takes the teeth out. Grandmother, these are very hard. Eat and keep quiet. They are your grandmother's teeth. What did you say? Eat and keep quiet. Which she does. How? How do you eat teeth with your teeth? Yeah, uncooked rice is tough, but not like teeth tough, right? Anyway, after the tooth rice, she's still hungry. Go to the kitchen cupboard, says the ogre. You will find 2 pieces of chopped meat there. She goes to the cupboard and takes out the jaws. Grandmother, this is very red. Eat and keep quiet. They are your grandmother's jaws. What did you say? Eat and keep quiet. So she eats them. Raw? Again, how? I don't know, and I don't want to overthink it, and you probably don't want me to overthink it either. Anyway, she of course gets thirsty. Just look in the cupboard, says the ogre. There must be a little wine there. She goes to the cupboard and pulls out the blood. Grandmother, this wine is very red. Drink and keep quiet. It's your grandmother's blood. So she drinks it. Full and not thirsty, naturally Little Red is now tired. Take off your clothes and come into bed with me, says the ogre. And she does. It's here that she notices something hairy. That comes with age, says the ogre. And long legs. That comes from walking. And long hands. That comes from working. And long ears. That comes from listening. And such a big mouth. And even if some star-fated huntsman were to swing by and rescue her, she's a one-bite meal apparently, onion layers to snuggle an ogre, but she also unwittingly. This next one's interesting. It's pre-pro, so there's no red cap, but there is a hot loaf for Granny. One of many, just wait. A dangerous, likely lecherous wolf, another Granny snack, and some quick wit. On her way to Grandma's with milk and a hot loaf in tow, the little girl encounters a wolf who asks where she's going and which way she's taking to get there. Like in every other story, he gets to Grandma's, eats most of her, and puts some of her flesh and blood in the pantry. When the girl gets to the house, she has trouble opening the door, but the wolf assures her it's just blocked by a pail of water, instead of her grandmother's remaining remains. She enters and offers up the hot loaf and milk. Put it in the pantry, my child. Take some meat that is there and the bottle of wine that is on the shelf. Ew. While she's eating, a little cat that was there says, "For shame! The slug is eating her grandmother's flesh and drinking her grandmother's blood." But this little slug either does not hear or can't understand the cat. "Get undressed, my child, and come to bed with me." "Where should I put my apron?" "Throw it into the fire. You won't need it anymore." And this fairy tale is very, very explicit in what is removed, so there are no doubts. Her bodice, her dress, her petticoat, and her shoes and stockings. She asks where she should put them, and the wolf replies, "Throw them in the fire, my child. You won't need them anymore." In the bed, the little girl says, "Oh, grandmother, how hairy you are." "The better to keep myself warm, my child." And this goes on and on, back and forth, as we very well know, except, "Oh, grandmother, what a big mouth you have." "The better to eat you with, my child." "Oh, grandmother, I have to do it outside." "Do it in the bed, my child." What? No. "Oh, no, grandmother, I really have to do it outside." "All right, but don't take too long." Nothing like a witty, well-timed grandma snack-induced hot loaf bathroom break to break the dramatic and dangerous tension. The wolf insists on tying a string to the girl so he won't lose track of her, but she ties it to a tree and takes off running wild and free, as all her clothes have been thrown in the fire. She is one of the few that make it out of this story alive. The end. Still, poor grandma. And what's up with the slug-shaming cat? Thanks for the commentary, bud, but some advice or help probably would have been better. This next one, which was printed later than some of the others, claims that it is the true history of Little Golden Hood. I mean, it says that in the title and in the first few sentences. Like the title, our girl does not have a red cap, but a golden cloak. Well, golden fire-colored. This is important, that her sassy witch grandmother made for her. This girl also has a name, Blanchette, but everyone of course calls her Little Golden Hood. Mom gives Blanchette cake to take to Granny's house with express instructions not to stop along the way. But this is like the 5th story, so you know how this plays out. Blanchette meets the wolf, who pretends he knows her and is an acquaintance, comments on her looks, asks where she's going, says he'll run ahead to tell Grandma to expect her, etc. But there's a problem for the wolf, finally. When he gets to the house, it's empty. Not a soul is there, and especially no old woman to devour, because remember, she's a witch and had to go to market early that day to sell her herbs after all. Wolf instead slips into her unmade bed, puts on her nightcap, and closes the bed curtains. Blanchette, of course, is dawdling in the flowers, but when she finally arrives at Grandma's, she notices that her voice is a little off and says so. The wolf plays into the sick angle, pathetically coughing and saying, "Shut the door well, my little lamb, put your basket on the table, and then take off your frock and come lie down by me. Ye shall rest a little." Is it normal to snuggle with sick people? This is like the 3rd time it's happened. Anyway, Blanchette is completely in the buff except for the little golden hood that she never ever takes off. When she sees how weird Gran looks in bed, she says, "How like you are to friend Wolf, grandmother?" "That's on account of my nightcap, child," replies the wolf. Same as every other story, we go through hairy arms, big tongue, mouthful of teeth. But when the wolf opens his mouth to crunch little Blanchette's head, she ducks out and cries, "Mama, mama!" And the golden cap that is actually a magic golden cap burned the wolf's throat. At that precise moment, Grandma Witch returns from the market, which was apparently fruitful because her long sack of goods is empty, and opens the bag to catch that rascal wolf in head first as he flees for the door. Buff not frail witch Granny then dumps the sack of vagabond wolf into a well, where he crashes and drowns. "Ah, scoundrel, you thought you would crunch my little grandchild? Well, tomorrow we'll make a muff of your skin, and you yourself shall be crunched, for we shall give your carcass to the dogs." Granny does not mess around. She heads back inside, dresses shivering scared Blanchette, and gives her a real, not grandma, cake. The end. And speaking of gruesome grandparent revenge, there's one more wolf ending I want to tell you about. In a Romanian tale, a grandfather has rescued his 4 grandchildren from a wolf with scissors, as we've already heard. However, he fills the empty cavity of the wolf's belly up with lime and stitches it back up. When the wolf flees, he runs to the brook where he drinks a lot of water. This causes the lime in his belly to boil and burn, and the wolf bursts apart. What a miserable, explosive end. Little Red Riding Hood certainly has changed over the years, and here were a few of the darker variants. Perrault's tale is a cautionary tale for children, especially young women and yes, even little girls who unfortunately have always had to be extra careful. And looking at the old illustrations from children's fairy tale books, where Little Red is such a heartbreakingly young child, makes this even more messed up and urgent. As disturbing as these tales are, they were absolutely crucial lessons. But which was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for tuning into this dark stroll in the old fairy tale forest. Do subscribe so you won't miss the next creepy fun tale coming out of the cauldron quite soon. Goodbye!